Konnichiwa, Samurai James here with part 2 of 3 of my review of the green samurai armor from Iron Mountain Armory. In this video, I'm going to be covering the body and the arms. Now, I absolutely love this piece. It's one of the iconic pieces of samurai armor, especially with the colorful lacing to it and all the different patterns. I've upgraded to brass trim for a lot of it. I love the kikogani along the collar here, and that it's not the bright white color, that it's more of a tan color. I didn't actually specify that. Iron Mountain Armory, I guess, just thought it would look great and did it, which is wonderful. I thought at the time that white was the only color that you could use, but now they have actually got a few options on the site. And just like the rest of the armor that I've shown so far, it's got this nice decorative edging to it. It's well done inside, nice and flat. There's nothing inside that's going to rub on you. It's simply got the fabric to it. The watagami straps have the brass trim and are simply gorgeous. One of the nice things with this is that it has a removable pin on the side, so I'm actually going to take that pin out right now. I don't know if this is just a little Taisho edition here, but it's got a small piece of odoshi here, so I can simply lift it out and pull it right out. On the Gashira armor that I have, it does have the same removable pin, but I generally have to grab a pair of pliers to actually pull it up because it's missing a little bit of lace at the top. It's a small detail, but it's a detail that's definitely appreciated. Alright, with the back plate out of the way, I'm going to start here on the front. It has a long tie here that goes through a loop on the other side to tie it off, and this side being the hinge. I love all the brass detail that I had added. That was an upgrade that I asked for. The detail of these fittings is wonderful as the rest of the armor. It is the black Uzumaki finish and the same lacing to it. Just beautiful, beautiful stuff. The pattern Igawa here is nice and soft, very good, clean, crisp pattern to it. The Jabara Fusi that goes along the edges here, just really well done. I love the patterning here with the green and white trim. It just really ties everything together. The Kohazi and Seme toggles on the Taisho class are much, much thinner than the chunkier ones on the Gashira. I didn't think that would be that much of a difference, but there's something about it that I just visually like. I understand that historically some were thicker and made of buffalo horn and would have had the larger fittings, but I just really like these much smaller ones. Definitely a personal preference, but it's one of those things that I think in all my future armors I'll certainly go with this style of them. Now on the side here, one thing that has been a little bit off and on for me is that this plate moves back and forth a little. I think I can solve it just by getting this a little bit tighter. I think that's just an artifact of, constantly moving back and forth like this and flexing my arms in and pushing it in and out. And I believe what happened is just pushing it in, loosened it up, so now it's a little bit loose. But nothing is broken, nothing's torn, so it should be just as simple as tying this off a little bit. And that lacing is visible here in the back, so it's not anything that I have to even remove the inside for. But while we're here looking at the inside, this Taisho class has beautiful Igawa even on the inside. Nobody sees this, but it definitely helps with the comfort of the armor because underneath of this is where all the lacing is with the little bumps and bits. So the Igawa is just another level of comfort in between you and the outside of the armor. And you can also see here from the inside, for the brass fittings, they put little bits of leather over top to also help with that comfort factor. The lacing here is really nicely done. You can see where the knots are tied off. The knots are tied off very small. They're glued down. It keeps from having a big bump inside, and I definitely appreciate that. It's a little bit of things here and there, but a lot of these little details really add up to make such a wonderful quality armor. Now I also opted to get 2 holding rings. That's this brass ring here and here so that I can hold something when I'm wearing the armor. For this, I use it sometimes to tie a lace, odoshi lace through here if I want to attach a pouch to it. Historically, it could also be used for something like hanging a baton or carrying other small things like that, bag of rice, the little balls that they have that were bound up like that. You'd usually carry it over the shoulder, but if you only had 1 or 2, maybe they would tie something off here. I don't know too much about the historical use, but I found some uses for them in modern context and seemed like a nice little thing to add. If you've seen my unboxing of the armor, it did indeed initially come with the 2 rings up here, and I really don't care for them. I know they're historically accurate, particularly in the Edo period when they like to have the 2. In the earlier days they had 1 because it had a function that I'll detail in another video, but to me it's just weird. It's like, hey, I don't really want nipple rings on my armor. Personal preference, nothing wrong with it, but I was very upset when I first got it and saw it. I thought, oh no, it's got to get exchanged, blah, 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 but that was not the case. They simply go through two little brass bits, and what I did is right here and right here, you can see where there's a little circle just like these. That was all that was behind there, so I was able to simply lift this up, bend the tabs over, and pull them back out. So luckily I didn't have any real problems with the armor, just popped those right out. They were done through the existing holes, so you can't even tell they were ever on there unless you'd seen that video. Now let's move on to the back plate. Now the back plate is built in very much the same way. The front plate, the same for the plates for the lacing. I'm not going to cover that again. The Igawa, all that is beautiful, same thing. The Watagami straps, brass trim around the edges here. It's just a nice little detail that I had upgraded. The Kikogani around the collar, which I've mentioned before. Now on mine, you'll notice that there's actually 3 sets of ties here rather than the Kohaze and Seme toggles. This one here is what goes into the center ring of the o-sode. These two are what I use for lacing my kote to. These did not come with it, however the holes were pre-punched, and when I talked to Mr. Astorita at Iron Mountain Armory, I said, hey, what are these extra holes here for? I don't see anything in it. I thought perhaps that the sewing had popped loose here, and as you can see, mine has come down from that. But again, I've had this armor for 3 years. I've worn it. I've, been moving around in it constantly for that. Here's one that's actually sticking up. All I have to do is clip this and then sew it through and then tie it off underneath. It's not a big deal. It's just a little bit of maintenance that I haven't got to yet, but it's the off season, so I'll be doing that soon. Anyway, back to the armor here. I said, what are these for? And he said, well, we put those in so that if you ever choose to go to regular sode instead of o-sode, you already have the holes that have been pre-drilled, that have been painted over and sealed up, so that you have the option to add Kohaze and Seme and put regular sode on, which is a cool little thing. I don't think I'm going to do that because I just love these o-sode with the large lacing and the Igawa and everything else. So I took advantage of that and went ahead and put these couple laces here so that I could use it to tie the kote to. Now the cord here that comes up over top of the Watagami to help keep them more firm, this definitely helps add to it. I had an armor before that did not have this cord, and the Watagami were just a little bit too floppy. Since it is thinner metal, especially trying to stretch up over the shoulder, it's just a nice extra bonus, and it comes up through here, which is directly what hooks into the Kohaze and Seme here, that you flip it through here and tighten it down, and I just love the way that that works. It's so easy to get in and out of. I can put the body armor on by myself, which is something I certainly can't say for most of the European armor. Now moving down a bit here, I did get the bracket for the Sashimono banner, so it's got the bracket here and the receptacle at the bottom, which the ukizatsu, which is the banner holder, drops through. However, at the time, I wasn't really thinking through how that would impact the bow here. Now, you can put the bow to either side like this, you can still put the lacing through, and you can put the banner bracket through here, but it's a little bit much, and I've never actually worn the banner in the bracket like this, so in retrospect, kind of wish that I would have skipped on this. It's just one of those things that at the time I saw, I thought, yeah, I'll probably do that. And, I do have a Sashimono, but I think if anything else, I'd be more inclined to simply carry it around our Ren Fair where I usually get to wear the armor. For that, there's some tree cover that's not that tall, so having something that much taller up off my head, I'm going to be literally clipping the branches and running into stuff with it, so it's not really logistically good there. And, I don't have 15-foot ceilings in my house to display it. If you got super tall ceilings or something, or, you got the space to display it with it on, I think that would be pretty awesome. But since I don't, it's one of those things I kind of wish I would left off. But the quality of it is great. It's got the same black uzumaki finish. It came with the ukizatsu. That all fits, so no complaints on any of that. Now it's also got the nice fitting here and the dragonfly knot, which is used for attaching things, and I will cover that in a separate video. And down here at the bottom, it's got the bracket holder, which also has this small pillow. The little pillow also came on the armor, and what that does is prevent the bracket from rubbing back and forth and abrading on the lacing. Again, a small little touch, but a really nice touch that helps extend the durability of the armor. Now for the kusazuri, it is a 7-piece. There are 3 on the breastplate and 4 here on the back plate. These from the middle, there are 2 over, and on the breastplate there's 1 in the center and 1 on each side. And a lot of people think breastplate, backplate, curious, 50-50. That's really not the proper split to it. The breastplate should be a little bit smaller than the backplate as far as circumference so that they fit together a little bit better, and because your body is not split exactly in half. And they knew this centuries ago, and it's really neat that they actually made the armor accordingly with the way that they did the kusazuri on it. For this, it's the same black uzumaki finish with the artificial scales. It's done in the dark green, transitioning to light green and dark green like I asked for the chidori. And you'll see again, just like on the other armor that I showed before earlier with the Haidate, it's got a single one here, a single one here, and it has staggered squares rather than, square, 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 square. It just really adds to the visual. I apologize about a little bit of the fuzz on this. Again, I've had it for 3 years and worn it indoors, worn it outdoors. I wear it anywhere and everywhere if I could. So anyway, great kusazuri. It moves around very fluidly. As you can see, no problems with moving around. None of this is broken or anything, even though it moves around like this. All of these edges, you can see I'm running my hands over them, nice and soft, so no worries about this abrading up into the lacing. Haven't had any issues with it whatsoever. Now on the underside, you can see the underside of the knots here. You can see the underside of the plates here. Again, I believe this whole suit is actually painted inside and out. That's definitely good for helping with the rust resistance. The o-sode, one of the things that I really like and one of the things that drew me specifically to this style of armor. It's got, once again, the beautiful igawa to it, the jabara fusi, the trim at the top, the brass trim that I had added as an upgrade. I love everything about these. The fittings are beautiful, the quality is wonderful, just like the rest. The plates are nice and soft. No real problems with much of it, with the exception of the tassels. I have had a number of issues with the tassels, which I will cover here briefly. Now, as you can see, the end of this tassel certainly doesn't look good. What I need to do is get that cleaned up and clipped off a little bit. It's one of those maintenance things that I haven't got to yet. I have mine tied off a little differently than you may have seen some other suits doing. This is what I ended up doing because of the damage to the tassel. And what it is this end here is gathered up strings that are tied around the edge here with a small little knot. And as I was trying to pass this through one of the rings, trying to decide exactly how I wanted to route it, it wasn't quite coming through. So as it went through the ring, I just pulled on it and pop, there went the end. It's not, or at least doesn't appear to be glued on here or heavily secured. And maybe that's something that's not necessary if you're not really pulling on it like that. I've learned that if you're pulling it through and it gets stuck, you have to actually push it from the back to get it through like that to prevent it from popping off. But it took a few failures of that for me to learn exactly what was going wrong with it. It does work fine this way. I'll have another video covering how the o-sode are attached. But for now, I have the extra lace tied off, and this one goes through the bow at the back of the armor. There's also this set of tassel here that goes through the bow at the back as well. And I haven't had any issues with this. It's just the one around the top and trying to decide exactly what I wanted to do with it, how I wanted it to route, how I wanted it to look. Just the same as I don't like the rings here in the front. I don't really care for the tassel hanging in the front either. So in my case, I've made a loop here and then just tied off the extra here so that the loop goes through the straps at the front. And again, I'll cover the details of that in another video in the future. One thing that I really like about these is this fabric here on the inside. It actually sits in between the plates and your arm when you're wearing it. Since this has plates at the top on the kote and the mail as well, that's something that could really be rubbing and abrading onto the lacing here or onto the plates themselves. Since the plates are painted here, once that paint starts to wear off, that's a danger for it rusting and then potentially flaking off and everything else. So I really like having this here. It also reduces the noise. Not that that's really important in modern context, but it's nice to be able to walk and be able to actually speak without hearing clank, 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 which, once again, to make comparisons to the European stuff, sometimes it's just really clanky and there's not much you can do about that. But it's a nice little detail. The only thing that I would have liked with this is to have this fabric match the same as the rest of the armor. I don't know if that's a normal thing for it to be different or if there's an option to match it. Again, I bought this armor 3 years ago, so that may be something that you could do or simply ask for. I didn't know that that was a thing to ask for or even know that this would be on the inside, so I consider it a bonus that it's actually here because it's one of those things I didn't even realize I was getting. The same igawa trim here on the top is the same that we saw inside of the dough earlier, and I really appreciate that extra level of just detail and beauty to it. A lot of people have said samurai armor is really like art, and it's true. It's very much an artistic thing of beauty. Now, as far as the wear and tear, there's just a few small things. One of the laces here is beginning to fuzz up a little bit. I simply need to clip this off and then put a little bit of glue here to keep it from fraying further. And then underneath of the other o-sode, same sort of thing. I've got a little bit of fraying here, so I just need to clip that off and glue it. That's actually an end knot, so it's not too surprising that that's popped off a little bit. And that's just an artifact of it rubbing on things as I've walked along, sat, and it's touched other parts of the armor. Perfectly normal, happened historically, happens now. It's not anything I'm mad about or upset about or that has any sort of quality problem with the armor. It's just normal wear and tear. It happens, it's a simple fix. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But again, off season, so I'll be taking care of that shortly. Now let's take a look at some close-up video and photos of it. Let's take a look at the kote. I'm going to work my way from the hand all the way up to the shoulder. Now for the hand, we have the plates called the teko, which has a strap for your middle finger and for your thumb. Now unlike a European gauntlet, this just keeps a plate roughly in place over your hand to help protect any strikes that may be coming to the top, but it doesn't form fit exactly like a European gauntlet does. Now in this case, you can see it's a bit loose over my fingers, and that's just the way that it comes from the factory. You could actually tighten this up by sewing it down a bit or by pulling it up here through the top and sewing it down a little. I do sometimes wear gloves with this called yugake, which are authentic samurai gloves. So I do want a little bit of extra slack, but there is a little bit that I could tighten up on this that'll help keep that plate in place more. Now the kote have the leather padding inside as well as being sewn around the edges, so it's really nice. It's the same uzumaki texture that I have on the rest of the armor. It's got a little bit of embossing here over the hands. The mail is nicely done. It's an 8-in-1 style pattern where there are doubled up rings for everything going flat, and the circular ring that you can see here on the top is a single ring. This is a very common pattern in kusari, so it makes sense to have it on most armors. It has got holes along the edges of the teko here that it's attached to, as well as how it articulates here on the hand and here on the thumb and going up the rest of the arm. So from here we have mail covering the wrist going up into the splints for the forearm. Now the splints for the forearm are 4 separate plates which have holes in them and are laced together to give it a little bit of flexibility left and right. And like almost all samurai armors, it is laced up on the inside, but you can see the same nice silk pattern here. Now for the splints on the arm, they are rounded at the corners. You can see this actually has a bit of a curvature to it. It's not a hard edge, so it'll keep it from digging into your forearm once it's tightened down. It tightens down on the inside just like all other samurai armors that I've seen. And the lacing is more than enough to have a little bit of gap if you need to for sizing purposes. Now on the forearms, there are 2 loops here that the cord goes through that help keep it in place so that it doesn't slide back and forth. You can see here where the excess comes around and simply can be tied off. Now moving up a bit more on the arm, we're getting to the elbow section. For this, there is kusari once again. However, at the bottom where we had a solid pattern all the way across, there are specifically some squares left out here. This helps with moving the arm a bit and seems to be a common place that in the historical armors, they didn't have kusari all the way across. There's also a plate here to help protect the cap of your elbow. Now one nice thing about this is that the mail is actually sewn down all the way along the edges here so that it's not simply flopping around loosely. I had a much cheaper eBay suit of armor that didn't even actually have any kusari on it at all, but it's really nice that this is sewn down. Having had some butted European mail, there's quite a bit of difference having the butted mail here in the Japanese style that's actually sewn down. Even though it's a different type of weave to the mail, there is definitely a difference in having it sewn down for keeping things in place, and that's a nice little touch. It's something that's very tedious, of course, but it really adds to the quality and the feeling of the armor. Now on the mail, there are some spots where the paint has worn off of this. Again, I've had this armor for 3 years. I've worn it a bunch. This is simply an artifact of the mail rubbing against itself and rubbing the paint off. That's nothing to do with the way that it was painted or the quality of it. That's just an artifact of metal rubbing metal and the paint giving way. Now here in the upper arm, there are smaller splints for these. They are ridged up and down. The ridging gives it additional strength. Just like you see in the European armor that would be Gothic style that's fluted, that ridging gives it some extra strength compared to a flat plate. And for this, there are holes in each side of it, and these individual plates are also sewn down on the arm. Every single plate on both sides, which helps keep them in place, and again, really adds to the feeling of quality with the armor. And one more thing with these, each of these are rounded off around the edges, which again will help reduce any wear and tear on the fabric with the armor, compared to some cheaper armors that I've seen that have squared off plates for cutting time and cutting cost. Those will wear through the arm much quicker because you have a sharp corner abrading into your fabrics. For the top plates here, it has a very gentle curve to it, which again will help keep from abrading fabrics, but will also help prevent biting into your arm as you're moving around with it. The top plate is sewn down really well. It has a pair of lacing on either side here, as well as the lacing inside, and I'll go over that in a separate video. Flipping over to the inside, it's a nice blue inside with the decorative trim up here around the edge. The stitching is very tight in here. There's not a lot of visible stitching to it, so it's just very good quality. The laces here, they're done with an X and box pattern, which is about the most secure way that I can think of to actually attach the lace like this, which is good because as you're moving around and it's getting some tension on it here and there, you want a really good secure attachment with it. Now that's not to say that it can't fail. It certainly can. I believe on my Yukimura Sonata armor, one of them has actually popped out before, but that's really not so much usually the point of attachment here. What happens is it gets tied too tightly, and as you're pulling, either the lace is going to snap or the thread is going to snap, and since the thread is the weaker point there, generally the thread will pop off from that point and then the kote will, let loose on that. But that's just an artifact of having it a little bit too tight, moving kind of the wrong way. That's just what happens. And, this is fabric straps, this is thread, this is things holding stuff together. On European armors, if you have your strap too tight and you pull, you can actually pull a leather strap out of a steel rivet. It's just the way that physics works. So it's not really a fault of the armor, it's just the way that it's put on, or possibly, in that case, if you had it made and it popped out, and maybe it's the sizing to it that was off, but, I know it wasn't my own fault when it failed before. However, again, as a wear and tear item, sometimes this thread over time will start to wear out. It simply needs to be resewn. This isn't anything that's a huge problem. It's something that they would have dealt with historically, and thread is thread, so we have the same thing today that they had centuries ago. Now let's take a close-up look at the kote. If you haven't seen the other parts of my review, they're going to be linked down below for the full playlist of all 3 parts of this series. If you found this informative, I'd appreciate a like and a subscribe if you haven't already. This is Samurai James saying thanks for watching and sayonara.